Hello, everyone. I'm Osama Fayoun, and I'm excited to be hosting this online webinar today. I'm accompanied with our solution engineer, Vlad. The purpose of this webinar is to explore Supernova's company tier. I believe that is an important topic, and I hope that by the end of this webinar, you will have gained a deeper understanding of how to use and utilize Supernova to your advantage. Thank you all for joining me today, and I look forward to be to have an engaging and productive session. If you have any questions or comments throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask, share them in the group. I'll start by sharing my screen really quick just to compare um, the webinar of today comparing to the last time that we had over the team plan. In today's webinar, we're going to be focused on the key differences that we have between company and team and what would it mean to you as a user. So if you go to Supernova-io, the main thing that you will have in here in the pricing page is basically the three main self-service plan that we have and basically the differences that you have between them. Right away, if I go and scroll down to the main differences when it comes to features, they're categorized into three main differences depending on how our product is structured. And just a little reminder that Supernova is a design system management tool that focuses on building design system for your products, focusing on three main pillars. The first one is around content management, where you create spreadsheets or tables of your design tokens, assets, components. The second part is a documentation editor, where you start be documenting your products and your content management. And the third part would be our own exporters that help interpretate your design decision into a code ready to be used by your developers. So in the first part of Supernova, out of the main thing, you can see that for the company plan, the way it's different from the team plan when it comes to the custom token properties and automatic updates from Figma. Automatic updates from Figma could be found in the first thing once you're logged into Supernova. When you come to data resources in here and you try to link your files to Supernova, you will have the options of automatic update. So the company plan and the above tiers come with this option. So once you enable it, that would enable automatic synchronization of any changes that you do to your Figma file. Of course, after you publish it to your library to be pushed into your Supernova account. The second thing, in a documentation editor, there are a few differences as well. So when it comes to custom content blocks, which we're going to cover in a bit, custom documentation template, removing the sidebar branding, SSO for viewers, and a custom domain. Now, the custom domain, the SSO for viewers, and the custom documentation templates, these are settings that you can predefine from the beginning before you start building your design system, um, as well as the remove sidebar branding. For custom content blocks, we can explore that, how to use it in our documentation. So when it comes to Supernova in here, you would go to settings, and in settings, basically, you're going to have multiple options. One of which, when it comes to general, you have an active exporter, and this is basically your documentation template. You can choose different documentation template or create your own and create a structure of how you'd like to export or publish your documentation. So in case you're wondering whether you can customize this, the answer is yes. And you can just come in here, choose the active exporters that you have already built in here, and then your documentation will be exported the way you have predefined. Same thing for the remove of the sidebar branding. If you still see Supernova's branding in the bottom of the page, there is an option to remove the sidebar branding. I suppose it should be in one of these settings in here. So you can just turn it off and then you'll have your documentation without Supernova's branding. And the same thing with the custom URL, which you can customize to remove Supernovas from the domain. So it looks like your own brand. And then when it comes to the developer section, you can have your code base behind VPN. This is not something that we're going to be demonstrating. However, if your developers have any questions regarding how to set up their code base behind VPN, you can always reach out to our support or reach out to us as sales directly, and we will help them set that up. Now we have a multi-brand support, and when it comes to company tier, our um, our documentation will be branded by the brand that you include, so it will understand which branding you're referring to. And the same thing when you're going to be using the exporters, and I'm going to show you in a bit, basically in a preview, what would it mean to know which brand that you're exporting and how to pre-select that from the preview. Same thing for branded tokens and assets. So in the first section of the content management of Supernova, you can have different spreadsheets and tables of your tokens and assets branded by the name of the brand that you have in there. And then other basically other customization that you can have here in admin and security is basically you can have automatic domain recognition and IP whitelisting in comparison to the previous plan that we compared last time. And of course, you get some other support here in terms of a customer support. So without further ado, let's go to a Supernova account and see basically how you build the design system with Supernova's company plan. So first thing you need to do is to copy data sources and you start linking your Figma files. Now perhaps before coming here, you would need to go to your Figma file, publish your library, and once your library has been published, you're sure that you have the most up-to-date information coming from your Figma, then you can start sharing your file here. You copy the link of the URL and you share your data source in here. You select the tabs in here that you'd like to import to your Supernova account and you would import them all. We've talked about the automatic update. This is a feature that is available in the company plan. Leaving that on means any information that's been updated in Figma could be pushed back to Supernova through the automatic update synchronization that we have. Now, for the purpose of the demo, I've already linked my files. And another thing that you need to understand in the company tier is that there is no limitation to how many Figma files you can add in here for any brand or for your entire design system. There is no limitation on that regard. Of course, you can see that these three Figma files are linked to my primary brand. If I would go to my secondary brand, I would see there are no files attached to it. Now, when it comes to the first section in here, um, basically design system data or your content management. Before jumping into that, we've talked last time about creating multiple workspaces and multiple design systems in here. The company plan would not limit you with the number of design systems you can build. You can build multiple design systems in there, and you can have these design systems living in multiple workspaces or for each workspace that you're trying to build. Also, versioning here would not be any different to the team plan. The company plan supports versioning, and we've created a couple of versions with minor differences just to showcase how they could be different and implemented. But in the comparison thing, we've talked about the token and assets that are being branded. And what that means is in this spreadsheet or the table that I have of the tokens that have been imported from a Figma file, they are being previewed in my primary brand. If I'm to switch my brand to my secondary brand, I will have a different set of tokens. I don't have any tokens listed in here because I don't have any Figma file attached to it. But once you have your Figma or your data sources linked to your Supernova account, you're going to have a different set of components, tokens in here um, for that brand. And the same thing for the third brand. So when it comes to the primary brand and for your design tokens management, of course, as we have discussed in the first time, the table is completely customizable in the way that you can customize the values that you'd like to input in here, or if you'd like to remove them. Now, there are different things you can do in the table in here. One of which is you can add new properties or define new properties to track and describe your tokens. These properties could be of different types, as in text, number, boolean, select, and as you see the rest of the options. Now, another thing that you can do in here, Supernova offers a multiple themes or is a multi-branded theme. You can add your themes in here, and all you need to do is click new theme. You'll give a name to your theme and a description for it, and of course, a code name for it, because once you export it, you would like to know what is the code name for that theme. It will make it much easier. And then you choose where is that theme coming from. Now that theme could be coming from a data source, or you can create that theme inside of Supernova in here. So I'm to create a new theme in here. No description, no code name. and no source. It will give me an error because basically I'm not defining where the source should be coming from. Maybe a new data source, and then I would need link the Figma file in here, or I can choose one of the Figma files that are predefined in here. So this is how by you add your theme in here. I've already added the theme in here just to show the differences. And as you can see, there are different set of tokens that I have in here for two themes that I have implemented. Now with Supernova, you have the possibility of importing your tokens from your Figma file. When we're talking about all type of tokens that could be created in Figma. In addition to that, inside of Supernova, you have the possibilities of creating your tokens in here, and that goes to all the tokens that you can create inside of Figma, as well as some other tokens that are not currently supported by Figma, as a radiuses or measures or borders. And to do so, you would select the type of token that you'd like to create, and then you create a new token in here where you give it basically a new name, and you give it a value. You can copy the value compared to a different one, or you can give it a new defined value and a color. For example, we can set it to blue. Um, um, we can set the width to 4, and we can choose a different shape for it. Confirm. Now we have our own border. Now these values will not be pushed back to your Figma file in case you're wondering whether we have a bidirectional synchronization for tokens that are created inside of Supernova. That is not the case for now. However, we have an idea of how to do so, and hopefully we can bring in those news soon about how to be able to push information back from Supernova to your Figma account. But back to the token set, the idea here is basically to get rid of your spreadsheets, to make sure that all the tokens that are being used to build your design and are being documented are always in sync with your documentation editor and with your primary source of design, which is Figma. You don't need to manage them anymore in spreadsheets. You don't need to manage multiple tools anymore. One tool should be enough to build a design system around your products. Now, another thing that you could do here in Supernova is basically creating a similar sheet but for components. And when it comes to components in Supernova is basically a collection of information about the components that you've already created in Figma. And here in these components section, we're referring primarily to components that have been built inside of Figma. To import them into your spreadsheet onto your table, it's pretty easy. You add a new row, you give a new name to your component. Basically, you give it a description, and then you start linking the component in here. I can unlink this, for example, link a component, and then I can choose a component from the set values that I had imported from my Figma account. For example, the label button. Now, once I have imported my Figma component now, I can define multiple properties for it. As first, I can define the health status of it, which could be handy later on once I publish a custom block about this specific component, defining its health. This gives my viewers the ability to understand whether they can use this component or not, and what's its status. In order to basically control the naming of the status or the colors, you would come to edit in here. You can, of course, add new options of the new statuses depending on what you use at your organization, and you can set new colors in here basically to tag those statuses. Now the tables that we are building in here can come very handy in a custom block that we use in our documentation. Actually, multiple custom blocks that we're going to show you in a bit. So the more properties that you define in here, the more options that you have to display for your viewers in regard to your components, as in whether the component is documented, or was the last time it's been edited, and whether you'd like to link it to its documentation link or to a repository. Of course, similar to tokens, you can always add new properties of new values in here, depending on how you'd like to define your components. When it comes to assets in Supernova, these assets could be downloadable in here um, as an editor of the design system. However, at the moment, these assets will not be downloadable as a viewer unless you do an option that I'm going to show you in a bit that will allow you to download these kind of assets, or you will wait for a couple of weeks from now where we're releasing a new feature for our assets, which should allow you to be able to download the assets as a viewer as well in different formats, of course. To do so, to be able to download these assets, as a viewer. Once you have documented them, please come to settings in here, and then you would come to um, should be top navigation. Um, 8 to the home page in here, page and the blocks. So you'd come to blocks in here, and then there is an option for asset block and asset actions. If you'd like to be able to still be able to open the asset in Figma, you can click on open in Figma and then publish. So your settings are saved. And then once I document my assets, I'll be able to download them through a link that's going to take me to Figma, at least for now. And then the last section here, you'll be able to apply basically custom fonts to your documentation. This should help you a lot in customizing the look and feel of your documentation to exactly match your brand guidelines and the way your website and other applications look like. So this entire section is around basically content, components, and assets, creating spreadsheets of them, being able to track them, basically the content that you use to build your designs and design it. The second part basically is our documentation editor. Our documentation editor has a certain template which you can customize, of course, as we have mentioned earlier, from the settings in here and choosing the different exporter that you'd like to basically export your documentation in. But generally, you have two settings in here in the way that you'd like to put the layout, either vertical or horizontal. And one thing, as a basically as a trick, if you'd like to hide any of these kind of content, it's pretty simple. You click on edit in here, and then you add an underscore before the name of it. Once you do so, it will shade it out in here in the editor experience. And also, once you publish it, it will not be published to your viewers. Basically, it's going to be hidden. But back to our pricing page to be able to compare the things that we have mentioned in our documentation editor. So we have mentioned custom content blocks, and what that means basically for you to be able to add anything, for example, these are custom blocks that you can decide out of which brand you want to show and out of which theme you want to add in here and the way they can to be customized and viewed. So this shows an example of how you can add multiple contents here in Supernova. So part of my design file that I imported in here, it has some color palettes, it has some typographies, some assets, and some components. So to show you different possibilities of how you can document those, I'll start with the color tokens. So all we need to do to document anything inside of Supernova is to do a backslash, and then you choose type of the custom block that you'd like to add in here. In this case, I'd like to add basically a token group. And then I'm choosing the type of token that I'd like to document. In this case, I'd like to document my set of colors. And then, as you mentioned, it's a custom block, so you can decide basically in here for which brand you're choosing. For example, for my primary brand, and whether I would like to have a theme in it or not. I don't like to add the other theme. I'd like to choose the set of, or the group of tokens that I'd like to add. If not, I can choose one token and add them one by one. I don't think that's going to be feasible. It would make more sense to add them basically as a group, for example, my palette. And here then I can decide basically how we are going to be rendering the viewed experience of this block. You can already preview how it's going to look like in here and then decide which one meets your expectation. For example, the grid preview in here. Now, if I would like to add anything to my other brands, it's very simple. Again, I can modify it from that custom block, or I can add another token group around basically choosing the same color, and then I can choose my other brand. Now you're aware that I do not have any Figma files attached here, so I'm not going to have anything displayed basically for my second brand. But the idea is the more brands that you have in here, you're going to have custom blocks related to those brands. Now there is another way to combine multiple brands in one block, basically, or one tab. And this way you're going to be having an easier experience showing, for example, your components for Android, iOS, and web native in a tab that you can move between its tabs. So to do so, you click a backslash again at the tab section. And this tab section, you can add, for example, your iOS, Android, and so on. and your other, for example, your web app. Now, how you be able to use those, for example, when it comes to iOS, I would like to document my tokens for this brand, and it would be, for example, the token group of, sorry, I went back, colors, and then I'll be going to my tokens in here. So I'll choose my primary because I have some tokens in here, and then I'll choose only, for example, one token just to showcase what it means. For example, info, well, it has a couple of tokens in here. Then to switch, I'm going to go to Android, which probably has a different set of tokens in here. So I'll go my token group, and for the purpose of showing just a difference, I'm going to show a different set. For example, my semantic. So if I'm scrolling down between different tabs, I have different blocks showing similar content, but towards different products or different brands as an iOS, for example, in here, and my Android in there. And the same thing could be applied into anything that you'd like to add. So any tab that you'd like to create for the similar experience in here, you can do that, whether it's for typography, the same thing. So to add my typographies, I can do a token group, and then I choose the type. Now from here, instead of color, I choose typographies, and then show them all. Of course, I can decide on the brand again, and whether there's a theme and how it's going to be rendered in here, similar to what I'm doing with my colors. Now, as I mentioned, in the tab section, you can do the similar thing for the typographies in the tab section, but that depends on how you'd like to structure basically your blocks. When it comes to components in here, we've talked about how important is it to build your component table here with the most amount of details that you can include and with the most efficient way that's going to be viewed to your viewers. So be efficient and be detailed at the same time in building this component table because it can come in really handy once you publish it. So when it comes to the publishing experience now, I have multiple options to basically document my components. So I do a backslash, I do component health, and then the component health basically would allow me to choose one component, for example, my checkbox, and it will allow me to choose the options that I have already predefined. So the more the options that I define that table, the more options that I will be able to have in here to showcase. So just document it, for example. Now, similar to what we have done in the other tab, we'd like to include multiple components in here to showcase the differences between your brands or products. You can add in tabs in here. Again, your component, and the same thing you can do the component health in here actually. And then you would add your component, color token, for example, that shows the repository, Figma component, and documentation link and the status on it. While if you're a toggle component, it might show only one statuses. So the good thing in here is you'll be able to control those per component. So you don't have to have one way of previewing your component as a general preview. Again, you can um, you can control how this experience is going to be. So for the tabs thing, I'm going to have two tabs, one next to each other, tab 1 and tab 2. For the pills, they're going to be on top of each other, columns next to each other, or accordion. You can decide which preview suits you best, and you can just select it from here. Of course, once you publish, all of these changes are going to be implemented and basically shown as a preview once that's done. So that's one thing for component. It's called component health. Another custom bug that we're offering for components is basically a component checklist. Component checklist, similar to component health, allows you to choose one component, for example, the color token thing, and then here again, choose the properties that you'd like to showcase. But additional to that, you'll be able to add a title or description to your component in here that allows basically your viewers to have more information about this component. Additional to that, the way they're going to be previewed and published, the component health badge is going to be published as a banner or as a badge that you click on and you find the information. I'll show you that in a bit, while the component checklist is going to be published as a block that has all the information in there. The last thing that you can do with component in here from that table is basically publishing the entire table by choosing the properties that you'd like to basically display. For example, only the first four properties. Now, once that is published, as a viewer, you're going to be able to inspect that component by clicking Open in Figma. You're going to be redirected to Figma to see the inspection of the component. And in Supernova, you're going to be able to see all the properties that are in there. Now we support when it comes to components, we support more stuff. So apart from the ones that are being imported from our Figma file, you can either build your components using our React sandbox. It's pretty simple. And here, all we have to do is basically, first of all, um, define your dependencies in here and our render code package JSON. At the moment, you support React only. So just point your dependencies in here, and then you can start building your React component in there. I'm going to show you how it's going to look like in a bit once it's published, of course, for this calendar date. The second thing that we can do, basically, we can import your components that have been built in Storybook. And all you have to do is to do a backslash Storybook, and this could come from a public or a private URL, and you just embed it in here and publish it. You can have it with the add zone enabled, like this one, or with the add zone disabled, like this other option. Additional to those support for components, we offer a custom block basically for your code snippet. So similar to this one, you can add another one and basically decide the type of the code snippet that I'd like to add in here for my code block. It's pretty simple. You do a backslash code and you decide the language that you'd like to add in your code in here.
One more
Now,
thing worth mentioning is that we also support the private NPM registries and also private storybooks, either behind VPN, and you can just whitelist the IP addresses, or just private storybooks,
yeah.
where you have to log in.
Yeah, the last thing in here, you can basically have a markdown file in here as an alternative to props tables. I'm going to show you how that's going to look like. And again, that's a backslash markdown. And you can embed your markdown URL in here and publish it as an alternative to props tables. Now, the last thing when it comes to Supernova, of course, there are more details and more tricks on how you build your documentation editor. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time to focus on every one of these features, but overall, we would like to show how the workflow looks like when it comes to Supernova. So the last part is Supernova. After you build your library, you start building your documentation. It's time to inform your developers of your design decisions. This is where it comes to one of our strongest offering called the code integration, which is basically exporters. Now, the exporters that we have in the store are, of course, free of charge that you can download and use right away, or you can customize the output of the exporters and use it the way you like, or you can create your own exporters from scratch. Of course, your developers don't have to use the exporters here inside of Supernova. They can always download the Visual Studio extension and use it in their local environment. Supernova offers an integration in there. But in order to be able to use basically the exporters, you would install them. And once you install them, now you can come to something called hooks. And hooks basically are going to be your automatic observers of how you export basically your design decisions into a code. So let's build one quickly together here. New hook. You choose the event based on how you'd like the automatic observer to be triggered. It could be based on a source updated, which means your Figma file being updated, of course, published to publish the library as well. Or it could be version released, which means every time you publish a new version for your documentation. So let's say a version release in here, and then you choose the type of exporter that you'd like to export, CSS, Android, and so on. But before that, of course, it's important to understand what each of these exporters export. So when you come to the store in here, you can always click on a preview to see what these exporters export. In the company here, we have mentioned that these exporters are brand aware, so you can see which brand you're dealing with, which version you're dealing with, and basically which design system that you're working on. And these are the values that, for example, the Android exporter is going to export. Now, as I mentioned, you can use the exporter the way it's set up, or you can customize it and add new values depending on what is it that you're working on and matches your expectation. Or if none of these exporters are good for you, you can always create an exporter from scratch. It's worth mentioning that we offer a default documentation exporter and a markdown exporter, and that should be a very good way for you to create a backup of your documentation every now and then, because if you click preview in it, I would see that, for example, this markdown exporter exports my entire documentation in a .md file. So that's another way for you to be able to get a backup of your entire documentation, or in case you decide on building design system in-house and you'd like to migrate your content from Supernova to your own built-in design system, you can just export it or migrate it there. So when it comes to the hooks again, let's create a new hook, very quick, and then choose a source updated as a version release, for example, and then choose the exporter that we want, for example, the CSS exporter. And then you can choose the brand that you'd like to export that, which is basically your primary brand. And the next thing is that you're going to choose your delivery method. We offer Azure, Bitbucket, GitHub, and GitLab in here. Once you're logged in, you're going to choose your repository in there. Of course, you can specify the path in here and the branch, and then confirm it. Once it's been confirmed, this is going to be an automatic thing. You don't have to worry about it anymore. As a designer, you design your file in Figma, you push the information to Supernova, and your developers will be aware of any new changes that have happened based on publishing a new documentation. And the way they're going to get it basically is they're going basically to get a pull request in their the delivery method. For mine is a GitHub, and then once they approve it, they're going to have a list of the files that have been changed. For example, here borders, colors, gradients, and measures, and so on. So this is a quick way to show you basically how Supernova works. I hope this was beneficial for you in one way or another. Of course, if you'd like a tailored demo to your own use case, feel free to reach out to us as sales at Supernova or to our support group, and we'll be more than happy to do a demo for you for your own products. Is there any questions so far?
I just answered one, but there's another one for the paid version. Is there role-based access control for each user? Like some people can only edit and some people can edit plus publish.
Yes. So when it comes basically to click on your teams and see what permissions they have, you come to settings in here, and then you would go generally to team, and in the team you can decide basically what kind of access they have. The kind of different accesses that we have is basically the owner of the design system, admin, editor, billing, and viewer. And the differences of these options are basically in here. Once you come to our learning hub, Learn Supernova, you'll be able to go to administration, then team management and roles. Basically here, explain the differences between the roles that we have and what kind of access that they have. Billing and viewer are free of charge, of course. Editor, admin, and owner are paid seat as an editor, of course, with the different permission that they have.
All right, then we got a question from Kumar, how we can generate code for sign up Figma design. I guess what he means basically is like what you showed previously regarding the exporters. Basically through the exporters, like we take all these design tokens and we transform it into production code ready to be consumed by the developers. Let me know if this answers your question or not.
Suppose, Kumar, what you're referring to is this section, basically how to generate a code out of my own design, which as I showed you here in the preview, it shows basically how these things are going to look like. And basically, the design will come from your Figma, and then the output values in terms of a code are going to be sent to your delivery method based on how you've customized them.
Is it able to generate whole code for sign up form design of Figma? No, we're only taking design tokens such as colors, radius, measures, borders, and so on.
And assets as well.
Yeah, but not sign up forms, not components. We're not taking components and transforming it into code. Yes, those tokens are generated from Figma's color and typography styles. These are published styles in your Figma file, and then yeah, they are also translated through our exporters.
So yeah, just back to your first question, anonymous attendee. Can a free user and a paid user collaborate in the same space? Unfortunately not. Once we activate a workspace, a team will be added with different rules. They can not do so, a free user with a paid user in the same workspace. Another question from the anonymous again. Were these tokens generated from Figma color and typography styles? Yes.
I
Everything.
already answered that one. I already answered that one.
And
Use Token Studio instead. Actually, Osama, if you'd go where instead of understanding Supernova, I think there's the Token Studio test, yes. And if you would go to data sources, you would see that there's no Figma file in there. But if you go to the content management, there are tokens coming from a Figma file, and this was done through the Token Studio. For that, I can also share with you the link to how to set that up is through our CLI. And soon enough, we're also gonna have the user interface ready to be used as well. So yes, to answer your question, it is possible to use the Token Studio instead.
to answer your question, Ray, yes, we have examples of customers who have built their design system using Supernova. Of course, if you're interested in any of these examples, you can always reach out to us to sales, and we can provide you with the right examples that are public already and are using Supernova. All right. If you don't have any more questions, it was great speaking with you all. And you were able to take an advantage of today's.
Um, just a second, I would like to just share the link. I'm trying to find it. Sorry, Kumar, I don't really understand your question. Using own exporter, can we generate code form? What do you mean by that?
If you have a specific example of how to do so, Kumar, or at least what you're trying to do, please send us your request with all the details that you want so we're able to understand it. But we thought that initially what you mean is, would you be able to generate a code out of your design tokens and assets that come from Figma? The answer is yes. If you mean something different as generating a code out of your entire Figma file based on what the Figma file looks like, then that is not possible. You have to define the type of the styles, the assets and tokens in there, and then based on that, you can export these values.
And I've just shared the link on the chat with everybody for the CLI. How to say it.
Then thank you so much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to speaking to you all in a different webinar. Have a great day.
Have a good one.